My home security system went off and I don't know what to do. I push the home button on my Simply Safe alarm system. The familiar voice says, "Simply Safe on." Home. My wife would tell me that voice brought her comfort and peace of mind. I felt the same way. It was part of our nightly routine. Pick up around the house a bit, change into pajamas, brush our teeth, and turn on Simply Safe, knowing that no one was coming into our home unannounced in the middle of the night. Our personal sentinel. Last night, however, things were different. My wife and I were alone. Or at least I thought we were. I think it all began a few months ago. Summer had come and gone. The air began to develop that New England crisp that heralds a season of warm apple pie and playing catch in the backyard. When the maples and oaks shake off their colorful palette of leaves only to be crushed underfoot by schoolchildren wistfully dreaming of the holidays as they realize that autumn turns to winter in the blink of an eye in these parts. Folks around here seldom leave the house during this time to avoid the wind that bites their skin no matter how many layers they're wearing. Despite the cold and short days, I love this time of year. Nothing makes me happier than stretching out in my armchair, warmed by the fireplace and a mug of wild turkey and tea, and watching the flames dance cheerfully upon the logs. I can sit and stare at the fire until my wife calls me to bed. Its effects are hypnotic. I reflect on my daily life, my boring job, my terrible commute, how I have to endure this grind of adulthood that has no end in sight. But on this night I was contemplating the fire itself, how it separated us from the beasts of the wild many centuries ago. It served as our protector, guarding us against the forces of nature, whether it be a starving pack of wolves or the frigid cold. Our ancestors slept on in the night while the fire kept watch. Suddenly I heard something. I snapped out of my trance and focused my attention. Another thing that I noticed about my fireside sessions was that I had grown accustomed to the noises of my house. Water flowing through the pipes, the floorboards settling ever so slightly, the sound of the trees outside my window as a gust of wind passed through them. Some sounds were more frequent, like the clicking of our radiators as they produced heat. Others were less frequent, like whenever the smoke detector needed new batteries and would produce a cacophonous chirp. This sound was different. It was faint, but as my ears zeroed in on the source, it became more distinct. Shump, shump, shump. I remained frozen. Its rhythm was irregular, yet whatever was making that noise seemed natural, like it was coming from another room, somewhere on the other end of the house. It almost sounded like my wife was walking around on tiptoes. I heard her get into bed a half hour ago. I think I would have heard her leave our room, but I couldn't be sure. We lived in an old one-story cape, where the living room was on one side and the kitchen was on the other. I could see our bedroom door from where I was sitting if I turned my head, and surely I would have seen her come out. I brushed off this lapse of judgment to a generous pour of bourbon and got up, still on alert. As I cautiously approached the door to our room, I hesitated. The strange sounds had stopped, as if they were aware of my presence. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My wife was in bed. "Babe, did you hear something?" I whispered softly. "Huh? Hear what?" She answered, her voice heavy with the sands of sleep. "I thought I heard you walking around." "Never mind. Probably just a mouse come to bed." She rolled over and that was it. Last winter we had a mouse problem. We hadn't seen them, but their presence was evident by the tiny holes that were made in trail mix bags and cracker boxes, leaving scattered food and droppings in our kitchen pantry. Some nights I could hear a soft rustling sound coming from the kitchen but didn't think too much about it until I put two and two together. We ended up catching 6 of them over the course of 2 weeks. That seemed to have solved the problem, but every morning for the next month we'd wake up anxiously wondering if they were truly gone. Maybe they were back. I crept toward the kitchen, holding my hands up in front of me in case I came face to face with something much larger than a mouse. The noise still hadn't returned, but still, I had to check. The booze flowing through my veins gave me courage as I approached the kitchen and flicked the lights on. It was empty. Nothing was out of place. I went to the pantry and checked for signs of mouse droppings. There weren't any. I lingered there for a few more minutes, seeing if the sound would return. It didn't. I convinced myself that my mind was playing tricks on me. So I turned off the lights and went to bed. By the next morning, I had forgotten how afraid I was in that moment. For the next few weeks, that shuffling sound was added to my list of usual house noises. It happened around once a week. I didn't think too much of it. There were no signs of mice. And at the time, I thought that the fridge must have been getting old. To me, it was as harmless as a creaky floorboard or the clicking of our radiators. I could have lived on in ignorance had it not been for what happened last night. It was my best friend's birthday. So naturally, we celebrated by going to his favorite pub and having a few too many pints of beer. I hadn't drunk that much since undergrad, and almost fell asleep in my armchair. I would have if it wasn't for my wife, who was sprawled out on the couch next to me. We were having a conversation about how quickly life can change. I was reminiscing on how happy we were the day we found this place when she let out a deep yawn. Bedtime, I suggested. Yeah, but I'm too lazy to brush my teeth. Me too. We can just brush them extra hard in the morning. As I rose from my chair, my wife cried out, "Wait. Don't forget the alarm." I pushed the home button on my Simply Safe alarm system. Simply Safe on. Home. The familiar voice said. Don't you just feel so safe when you hear her say that? My wife asked on cue. Smiling, I agreed. We found our way to bed. Our nightly ritual had a good run. Over 700 days. Not bad, I thought to myself as I embraced the beer-induced slumber that washed over me. The next thing I remember was being ripped away from sleep by a siren. It took me a couple of moments to process what the hell was going on. Our home alarm was blaring. My wife was already sitting up, a look of terror and confusion on her face. Her eyes were alert and urging me to go see what it was. Still wearing the clothes from last night, I raced out of bed. When my hand fell on the doorknob, I felt that it was warm. When I opened it, my eyes were flooded with orange lights and my nose filled with a pungent smell. My armchair was ablaze, and the fire, given a fresh supply of oxygen from my bedroom, was now dancing to the rug, the couch, and the walls. Adrenaline dumped into my bloodstream. My body kicked into flight mode and I yelled to my wife, "We need to go. Now." Before she could reach for any belongings, I grabbed her by the wrist. "Hold your breath," I told her, and we booked it for the back door. Once we were outside, I tried to dial 911 but realized I had forgotten my phone inside. Luckily, my wife's phone was still in the pocket of her jeans. We stood there in disbelief as we waited for the fire department to arrive. A lot of thoughts and emotions swept over me as we stood there, ignoring the cold November wind, when a firefighter approached us and assured us that only the living room got the worst of it. He mentioned that he had never heard of a security system doubling as a fire alarm. When I told him it didn't, he laughed and said that it must have been some act of God then. Our security system came with 2 home cameras. One is pointed at the front door, and the other at the back door. I asked my wife to check the recorded footage. She pulled it up. As we were watching it, I could feel my blood had suddenly turned to ice in my veins. The camera pointed at the front door gives a partial view of my armchair near the fireplace. A bright light flashes in the corner. Then the chair begins catching fire. Smoke starts to cover the top part of the video. Then, from the other side of the room, a figure emerges. It looks like a woman with long, shaggy hair. I couldn't see her face, but she seems older based on her crooked posture. She rushes towards the front door and opens it, triggering the alarm. She then straightens up and bursts into a full-out sprint through the front door, disappearing into the shadows. I catch one more glimpse of her through the living room window. Then she's gone. A few moments later, I open the bedroom door.